should we get started?
Yeah, I think that's. Let me see. It's 10:02. Yeah, I think either ways. Yeah, this will be recorded. So yeah, I think whenever you're ready, Clemens, I'll pass the stage over to you. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Clemens. I'm a solution architect at Consensus for almost 5 years now. And today I'm going to be going over from hackathon to production. Just a quick note, I sent in the chat that there is the resources to previously recorded material. You can find that at the page over here. And also note that there's Bounty specific recordings, so you can click into it and see the hackathon recordings there. Okay, let's get started. So the last session that I did last week, somebody asked about decentralization, progressive decentralization. So I just wanted to do a quick note on that. We are in the Web3 blockchain tokenomics space, and a lot of people just want to do a project that sprinkles on some of that blockchain goodness to get more funding. And I just wanted to give you a note that progressive decentralization and kind of this hype is not about tokens. It is about decentralization, as in removal of yourself as a key player to the software that you create. So it's all about open source. It's all about that ethos. And the idea of progressive decentralization is to warn you to not launch tokens right away, right? There is a process where your founding teams can relinquish that control over time. And so on the talk, last week, the question asked, what are the types of, decentralization? There's technical, economic, and legal. So on the technical side, what you want to do is use protocols that provide that trustless and autonomous execution. So that's using blockchain architecture, using the idea of kind of immutable transactions, open ledger for anybody to update. So you don't have to have, one single party. There's a lot of concurrent users at the same time. On the economic side, there is a term called stakeholder capitalism. And this sounds better than selling tokens. It's basically being able to do some type of governance with digital assets. So that could be asset ownership, trading, borrowing, lending, licensing associated to it. And then the last one is legal decentralization, which actually is a combination of technical and economic. And the idea is to have this bottom-up development of the ecosystem and create decentralized governance. And so if you do all of this too quickly or all at once, then you might have some issues because you'll probably slow your project down. The tools that we use to achieve this with blockchains and smart contracts, the key areas is transparency, data portability, composability, so money Legos associated with DeFi, reusing other people's open source code and making your own adjustments to it. For digital assets, it's really about the contributions and airdrops that are associated with alpha testing, beta testing, being an open source contributor, and being recognized for that. And then in decentralized governance, you want this for security. What happened? You want this for security by means of not having a single source of power, but also not having insider trading. So there should be incentive alignment and there should be transparency to this particular space. So lower your management overhead as well and kind of start to have more players in there. In terms of a startup, people here are just starting in your hackathon. What you need as a startup is a great team. Number one, having good leadership values, have lean development, meaning that you're breaking things fast and testing things. Have a tight execution, so focusing those team members, learning quickly, having a useful product, very important, and also having a community that's willing to use and pay for your product. So finding product market fit. And I think all of this has to do with trust. So you can't do this without trust, and you can't launch tokens without trust either. So just be wary. Everything's not about tokens, even though it looks like this beautiful thing that you want to launch right away. To have that trust in the mission, and this is about DAOs as well, I like to give the example of playing video games. The original use of Discord is to play a game, right? And to talk to the developers and to help them fix bugs. And I think that the mission behind playing a single game is that everybody's playing the same game. And so everyone's aligned on the same mission to make that game more fun for everyone else. And so I think in a company and in the whole ethos as well, you have to have a strong vision, strategy, and trust before you can do anything like open source your code, create tokens, or create a DAO around it. And so the conclusion here is you will still need product market fit and community participation in order to achieve the goal of building a Web3 type of startup. This is a slide that I drew to indicate the levels of decentralization that I've seen. So I should probably add some animations to this. But on the top, you have, your starting point is using a lot of open source code, right? And then adding on a version 1 with community testing so that you can open source your additions of your code broader to the community. So your founding team is doing a lot of work in the beginning. And then as you progressively decentralize, you may start to build out bounties. You may start to even ask parties to influence the roadmap or to build features in the roadmap. Same for community testing and partnerships and integrations. All right, this is what you want from the community. You want more partnerships and more integrations with your technology. On the economic side, you have your early subscribers and airdrop participants showing that they are doing voyages or quests for your particular area. So your seed funding should lead you all the way up to token distribution. And that means that you may be working with other DAOs, you may be creating grants, maybe you're a protocol that launches a grant, and you may be providing your own liquidity at first, but eventually you have market makers and LPs in the ecosystem that are providing liquidity on your behalf. And lastly, on the legal side, you have the previous projects and kind of what they have defined as regulation. Then you have an entity for DAOs. Maybe you're creating a foundation or a DAO itself that represents grants or other types of improvements. The DAO itself goes through a democratic process of voting for improvement proposals on your technical side. And then you may have also key roles and board members that start to move over to the technical side. And I've been listening to a lot of presentations, even from ETHCC. I like the idea of this DAO is not supposed to be a company. It's supposed to represent some type of state, meaning you have political parties that are voting towards making improvements to the ecosystem. So you're representing a state with democracy, not necessarily just having a single company. Great. Okay, so let's get into post-hackathon. So imagine you've completed the hackathon. What is the path for your startup? Here are the key takeaways. I'm going to be going through some of these and have a slide like this, exactly the same slide, but where I'll just kind of cover the same thing. First of all, what do you expect when you're working towards production? So these are the stages of companies, and this might not follow every business school type of stage, but I came up with it because I feel like there's distinct activities for your founders along this road. So we'll be going through each of these in separate slides. The most important thing is on the right side, which is you have to decide when to sunset your project. And some of the factors that might come into play is, one, you already launched a project or feature of a larger project. So let's say you were building an early social network and you were Snaps, and then, Facebook copies your Snaps with stories, like that type of thing. There is a high chance that the larger ecosystem of that social network will leverage your UI UX kind of improvement and feature, and therefore you may have some issues with launching something, especially if you don't have the same momentum. Luckily, Snaps has other innovations, but that's kind of the idea of a larger project taking over by just introducing a feature that they borrowed from you. You can also think about it as the opportunity cost and the time that you're spending on this. So maybe you can't make the time to advance your current project because you have a full-time job. Maybe there's some misalignment with the existing team members. They're not willing to put in the time as much as you are, and so you have to find new members to follow the idea. As well as maybe you tried this as a 6-month side project, but it hasn't led to any revenue, and you're just kind of paying for infrastructure costs end to end. Or there's just no feedback, or maybe no interest from advisors, parties that might help you with bringing your startup a little bit further along by doing introductions. And I think all of these are kind of just red flags to keep aware of. Yes, you might have won a hackathon, but a hackathon is just one of the first steps in kind of the entrepreneurial spirit. And I think that the one thing that AI can't replace, and there will be a section of AI later on, is execution, right? All of the ideas are cheap and prototypes are super cheap to build right now, but execution of a real product and worrying about site reliability and worrying about product market fit and building out features that your community actually wants is something that you cannot replace with AI. So focus on that instead. So let's look at the first stage, which is right after the hackathon. You have to talk to the right people to align on your project goals and analyze what your target audience looks like. So come up with a addressable market sizing. And for those who don't know what a market is, it's basically who's going to pay for your particular product. If it's a developer tool, you can't just say all of the developers in the world are going to use my new product because it's awesome. And if you're a protocol, you can't just say everybody that is providing liquidity on an L1 will then move over to my L2 or something of that sort. The things that you should consider: build out these personas, document and interview people. If you're, for example, there's a company that I invested in called PingPod, right? It's a autonomous space for playing table tennis in New York City. And so before they started the company, they did interviews with all of the ping pong players that they knew, and they created a known market to see how much people would pay for this type of service and what the pain points were in kind of the current industry. And so my recommendation is to do something similar, which is to understand who your users are and to document all those interviews so you can map them to the features that should alleviate those pain points. Another thing to do is thinking about the website and branding and going backwards to validate that business plan. So if somebody's reading your website, they might first think, oh, is this vaporware? It sounds too good to be true. Maybe there's just a lot of marketing magic in there. But you want to at least get feedback on what those keywords are about the marketing that made people interested. Because once people are understanding of your idea, then you may have maybe 3 to 6 months before you can build and launch that particular idea. Also worry about your operations, so internal tools and creating recurring calls. I think this creates the momentum that you need. If you're just getting started and you only meet once a month, for example, then nothing really gets done. Like people might scramble towards the end and build that out. Sorry about that. Hey, push. Okay. Also consider your initial rollout of announcing your interest in the project. Maybe it's specific advisors that could be of interest for other parties, kind of following along what you're building. Building obviously buying a domain name and creation of email addresses, creation of info at your company.com, right? Creating a mirror.xyz account for more native Web3 companies, creating a product launch blog post or a white paper or a business plan that you can share with others and show that you're earnestly developing. I think that's kind of in the core formation and base operations of your particular startup after the hackathon. So the first thing to do is market research. So understand the need. Think about that total addressable market, answering the questions of what problem are you trying to solve? What are the existing solutions in this ecosystem? How will you do it differently from other people that have their product already in play? And then most importantly, how do you make money from your product? So a lot of people misunderstand that businesses and their sole discretion to the board and their equity holders is to profit in some way, to generate revenue, unless you're running some shell company, which hopefully you're not. But the idea is to somehow get more jobs into the market, right? It's to hire more people so that you can create economic value. As an example, this is for Infura, our Web3 gateway. We're trying to solve. We think that connecting to Web3 can be difficult and expensive if you have a lot of DevOps costs, right? If you're using your DevOps members. So we created a service where people are basically using infrastructure as a service or enhanced blockchain interactions. And how will we do it differently? We have for example, within Infura, something called DIN, which is a decentralized infrastructure network. And we may also implement a marketplace, which we've seen live in kind of the ecosystem. And how do you make money? You charge developers and small companies and large companies for access to those APIs. And you can provide also a go-to-market opportunity for different Web3 apps if we're launching different apps onto the networks. That's just an example. This is very business school related, but create your diagram here, looking at industry forces. So who are your stakeholders? Who are the new entrants? What services exist? Look at macroeconomic forces, maybe economic infrastructure and commodities and other resources. Look at your market forces, so different needs and demands of your market segments. And also look at the key trends that are out there. So what's the key regulatory trends? I think that's very important. Socioeconomic trends, the users, and also the technology trends. So something related to AI, probably. Apologies, it's a little cold out here. Okay, next within market research is to also understand the customer. So when you're building something, sometimes it helps if you are the customer because you might gauge how much you would pay for this type of service. And for the most part, I think product people that start to build something are usually relating to that customer or have connections to those customers. These are also good advisory people to get in touch with, right? You want to categorize who might be interested in purchasing that product. So who would buy it? Is it a consumer product where it's kind of B2C, so you're the consumer, you're business to consumer, or B2B, where it's kind of business to business, so it's more of a company product? How much are they willing to spend? So try to figure out their current spend rate, for example, playing table tennis, right? Why would you use yours versus not changing? And I think this is an important thing to think about. People are very lazy. They're about defaults. And so if they have an operational process, a workflow, they're not going to change by experimenting with a new tool unless it brings additional value. So if they already know how to post a blog, or if they already have a website, why do they need to use Squarespace or Wix if they already have a manager, right, of that website? And then how would they learn about your solution? So what is your initial marketing efforts for people to use your particular hackathon product? And so as an example, again, in Infura, we have developers, startups, enterprise that want to connect to different networks. The price that they would spend is probably recurring price package per month. So now you know that you have a monthly payment with a particular company, and they may have different burst costs, or if they're trying to launch a token, maybe that's more expensive of a month, but there would likely be different tiers for how they would spend that money. Why would they use ours? Maybe there's particular features, maybe it's better, faster, or cheaper, therefore they want to use the service instead of, for example, running a full node. And then how would they learn about it? Well, we come through hackathons, universities, partnerships. There's different marketing tutorials that we created. We obviously have a lot of brands associated with this. So maybe there's brand association. There's bounties that you can create and prizes for hackathons as well. So I think all of that kind of comes through, and think about your particular solution and who would pay for it, and also how would you get other people to recognize that. Another important thing, everybody makes a pitch deck. I came from the finance space. We think about this a lot when you're building out your white paper and maybe your Gitbook docs and writing out your mission statement. Create some slides, right? The standard way to do this is to use DocSend, protected by a password, or logging in by email domains for access to it. And then you can be aware of who's sharing your particular pitch book around, if you're fundraising or if you're just trying to represent the ideas clear through slides. The three different types of slides that I've seen is an executive summary, a onboarding for partners, and then a fundraising deck. And they should have a lot of overlapping slides, but obviously different audience, different purpose, and different things that you're trying to show in terms of momentum and the particular problem you're solving. So just high level, there's a problem, some market insight, then you have your solution, your vision, the ecosystem that you're building. Have some high level user mapping flows, if this is definitely a website or is this a protocol, right? Show the architecture and tech stack and the flow. do some competitive analysis, think about your token, if that is something in the future, or don't think about the token and say that there is no token yet, right? Reference different projects that might be successful or could be of good learning. And if you have a makeup of advisory team members, that's also important to put in the slide. And eventually, having fundraising statistics or a timeline and roadmap of launch is also important. Like how you spend your funds, that's all part of the show. This is just 2 slides. Next 2 slides are examples that we've done for MetaMask and Infura. This is one, again, from my finance background, just thinking about how this looks. We created this slide to think about how financial institutions and payment processors could connect to MetaMask, Infura, Linea, other types of networks, the Web3 space, and what they get added to. So instead of just having a checking and savings account where you're just paying off your credit card bills, right? Or just, for example, receiving funds into your balance, right? Every 2 weeks. The idea of activating either a stable coin or an NFT marketplace for a financial institution means that they get to connect to central bank digital currencies eventually, or other types of investors or different types of institutional funds that might be helping with exchanges. Maybe there's staking offerings as well. I think recently there are some banks that are creating this type of bridge over to this Web3 space, which has a completely separate payments and settlement system. So just thinking about that value proposition and how you frame it for your particular customers. Another slide here, just thinking about how we can provide infrastructure services and what those look like. So just an example for Infura, we do transaction processing for MetaMask, MetaMask Institutional, and other high value customers that use this API or set of APIs to connect to Ethereum and other networks. We help accelerate development. We are doing protocol scaling. We also help with disaster recovery in case you need to connect to other services. We can be your DR solution for site reliability engineering. There's transaction gas management. There's DeFi access through staking. And then there's multiple networks that you can connect to as well. Okay. The next phase is usually related to private funding and creating a business plan. So this is how you further refine that plan and budget. So what is your minimum viable team size? What's your short-term runway planning? And so you and your initial devs are building this out. You will have to justify the funding ask. So if you're asking for $5 million, what's the runway for that? How long will that have? And then think about the overhead costs with infrastructure as well. So if you need to run nodes or if you're connecting to those services, that's part of your accounting breakdown. It's also important to have legal counsel. So what do you have to be aware of with regulations and the product vision? So if you're launching a token, especially, there is a lot of that in mind. There is also additional iterations of your blog post and understanding of the market. So if you're the CEO, CTO, you're writing more about how your company analyzes this particular market. You may also have an advisory council or a board of advisors. These are some of your stakeholders, but also some of the people that will introduce you to more experienced people in the industry. There should be board presentations and newsletters. So if you did do any fundraising, you should update your investors and interested participants on a regular basis. So on your website, just having a way to sign up to newsletters or sign up to investor newsletters as well. Then you want to think about what the third-party integrations look like. So if you're building a social network from scratch, for example, that might not work. You have to import different connections. If you're building this social graph, it's easier when you are borrowing from other social graphs that exist. So if you can sign in with Facebook and be able to pull all of your Facebook connections there, and then maybe recommend those new people to join that same network. So for example, like Threads that came out from Meta as a Twitter killer, right? Threads was very successful because it took all of your Instagram connections and allowed you to show new followings for them. And then, it was very easy for them to onboard 100 million different new users because they already had, 1 billion within Instagram. So they are just showing, 10%, 20% of their total number of Instagram users, for example. In terms of the white paper and the blog posts, some sections that you might consider having, and just also use ChatGPT for some of this, writing in an academic sense. But ideally, you are providing the vision, right? You're the one that is sharing how it works and what you're trying to build, as well as the competitive landscape associated to it. I mentioned progressive decentralization is to not have a DAO or a token immediately, but I just wanted to mention a DAO because some people will want to form one, at least form the starts of a community and show community growth by monitoring the number of people that have joined that DAO. The DAO itself is a decentralized autonomous organization, meaning that different types of parties are interacting with a single entity, and this entity should likely be a legal entity as well. But the idea is that you're under the same mission and there is a treasury involved, right? There is usually some type of funding, some type of gating mechanism to join the DAO. And the DAO itself needs to vote on how to use those funds to forward the mission. So it's not easy to start because it's all about community growth, but it is interesting to see all the different DAOs out there. I think there's probably going to be a lot of DAO mergers and acquisitions and an agreement to merge treasuries or to merge community members together. For those who want to review all the DAOs out there, I personally like DeepDAO. I took the screenshot probably a few weeks ago, but Arbitrum One has a huge DAO. BitDAO is ginormous. They are kind of this a known seed fundraising DAO. And why do you want to start a DAO? So DAOs are not companies. They are, again, these states. They are loosely connected. They have a grassroots movement. There's transparency involved. It's all supposed to be open and fully global. You can work with any DAO from anywhere. And again, there's legal problems with that as well. But at least if you're contributing to the ecosystem, it is completely open. DAOs can also have, again, this treasury, so they can be larger scale and provide additional income to the contributors. The structure is also usually non-hierarchical, although there are founders and smaller meetings for things to still get done. But usually it is a bottom-up to help with the vision of your particular company. This is an investment DAO example. So BitDAO, feel free to click through the links. I can share the link to these slides as well. But the idea is it is a DAO-directed treasury. So with those billions of assets, how do I operate this like an investment bank or like a VC fund of some sort? There are governance where you can use standard tools to vote on off-chain kind of ideas of what to actually invest in. And then there are also plans for scaling issues like governance or linked treasuries. There's tokenomics involved in there as well. This is not a popular slide, but some people do like to think about it this way. I can see a Web3 bank account being a DAO, for example. So if I am starting a company today, I will likely need to register a website. And so the company formation has a, what is your DNS? What is the website that you're going to create, right? And this is almost before you incorporate, you're already buying your website domain and creating that website. I think in the future, if you're building a Web3 product, you may have a DAO or at least a DNS or a ENS where you have Ethereum naming service, some type of mapping to the treasury. And if you wanted to fund your company with cryptocurrencies or with ETH or with wrapped ETH or other tokens that you may have fundraised with, then you can also reference that. And I think Wyoming and other friendly Web3 states are thinking about how to use DAOs as a way for not just connecting to the crypto Narnia world of payments, but also using DAOs themselves as a way to take care of all of the overhead that you have for creating a business. So if you're creating a company, you need a secretary that takes notes, you need accounting, and a lot of that and the transactions that occur are all on chain. So some of that can be referenced and reliable enough for a state to charge you for taxes and things like that. So it adds legitimacy, and I think eventually you will have a crypto bank account that is your DAO, ENS account. And so off-chain fundraising ways of doing legal joint venture agreements or voting on treasury allocations with board members. I think the DAO level of that is to create your DAO treasury, which is a collateral of tokens, having a membership vote, doing proposal voting, using those token shares, and then delegating power to other members that might be, the most active in your community. Okay, so back to kind of the next phase. So after you have created your team and you have your business plan moved forward, consider what it takes to grow your team. And so having a team of 3 to 5 is actually really, really hard to manage, because then when you start scaling up to around 10 people or so, it gets fairly serious, because you have to pay their wages or you have to somehow incentivize them to stay working on your project. So you need to first address the scaling issue. How do you manage this particular team of 5 people that are then going to be doubled to 10 people, right? And then how do you maintain the momentum and the interest from stakeholders? And so there should be an internal cadence. You should have some type of marketing assets and standing material. There might be onboarding type of material. If you're launching a beta, you have to create more targets for your partnerships for usage of that beta. Better documentation, separation of work for engineering is important as well. Think about your hiring funnel. So what is missing from your team? And again, a lean team that's providing input and improving the delivery of your product. Also have offsite meetings. So joining a hackathon, for example, and meeting everybody on the team is actually quite important, and you should allow a budget for that type of trip. And then also project management. So there's a lot of people that are great developers but terrible at managing their opportunity costs, and they get stuck on a problem or they're too focused in the weeds. And so having a project manager and being reliable on delivering that particular, bigger picture is also pretty important. Right? Web3s aren't necessarily all about tokens, but VCs do value your token and do value what your Web3 company looks like. I think it is, again, more being aware of progressive decentralization and not doing everything all at once unless you have enough team members or community members to do so. But your token value and the value of your Web3 project could include your protocol smart contracts, if they've been audited or not. How do they fit into existing protocols? Who are the partners and integrators? Who's in the dev team and who's on your advisory board? What's your media coverage? What regulations do you fall under? Are there particular validators? If you're building an app chain, for example, or super chain off of Optimism or Arbitrum or any of the super L2s out there that are creating L3s, is there a marketplace? Are you listed anywhere? Is there liquidity for your particular token? And are people interested in those tokens and incentives? So all of that kind of goes into the value of your token itself, as well as the value of your company eventually. And when you're designing a token, I do a separate course on just token playbook launches and DAO launch playbooks. The token itself has base functions, which is what's the supply and what's your distribution. But eventually it goes into these added supply controls so that you can incentivize the market to purchase your tokens. So thinking about single-sided staking, where the users send those funds back to the treasury and allows you to add more value to the program. Liquidity mining programs associated, airdrops to snapshots of activity on your testnet, doing multi-epoch drops as well. And then you can add additional options like creating a grants DAO, distributing tokens that way, or doing a multi-token formation DAO of some sort. There might be buyback mechanisms or burning mechanisms, and then maybe NFTs for membership tiers. So these are all just options that you can create for your Web3 token or for your protocol altogether. Your token can be launched on any network, right? But you can choose your network based on the liquidity that might be available, based on how much money you have in those tokens, for example, could be a big one. Maybe you've participated in some grants for launching to that token, and you've talked to the Polygon Labs team, for example, and they've given you, maybe a few $1,000s of runway to do another few months of burn rate. So that's also a factor there. And selecting the network preference, it could be based on gaps in opportunity. So maybe you want Ethereum mainnet because it has the highest liquidity and the highest security, and it's the most adopted, and people have ETH. But usually, grants and stakeholder relationships will lead you to which particular EVM compatible chain that you're going after. Or maybe you want to rewrite everything in Rust and then use Solana. Yeah, as well. There's different options and there's different communities, and you should find the one where you fit into best. Okay, next stage is, and some of these stages, it just shows the growth of your company and what you have to worry about, but also the importance of making revenue. So product market fit and recurring revenue makes it a successful company. You need your first 10 customers. You have to refine what your product does and create that recurring revenue stream so you can float your operational expenses, so OpEx costs. And so to consider interviewing your paying customers and seeing what you would do in addition to what you have currently. So additional features that you might want to prioritize. You may also want to tweak your UI, UX, maybe save additional calls that were necessary, and then doing accounting on your runway. So how do you not burn all the money that you've just raised and additional funding that you have? Also build out a marketing plan, community presence plan, and additional case studies for your target segment. So if you have a customer that's perfect because they have a high spend rate and you do a per seat cost for the enterprise, for example, then you want to replicate that particular ideal customer by targeting sales and business development in those areas. So finding a product market fit is probably the hardest thing that you're going to do. You can launch your MVP and it has some customers, so definitely learn from them. Customer loyalty, people say the first 5-10 customers are your most important ones because they are the ones that are championing and using your system and can tell you about their competitors or their existing flows. There's also your V1 features, so not just the MVP, but what do you need to add in order for you to be competitive in the market. Then it's also exploring multiplying your efforts for adoption, so leaning into partnerships and system integrators where necessary. And then lastly is refining your price point. So maybe you're acquiring customers at first because you want to take a hit on having a cheaper service. And so this happened in the Web3 gateway space, right? These APIs, people came in with very, very inexpensive API costs and say, well, if you switch to us, you don't have to pay as much money per month, and we can have this much savings. And so a salesperson can do that very happily and just sell that all day, because if you're a cheaper service and you have the same features and you have feature parity, then people will probably use you and hopefully get like a kickback of some sort, right? So there are opportunities for switching as well, but if you make the switching cost zero because you have the same APIs or the same standards, then somebody might switch over to the cheaper product, or at least they would go to their competitor, your competitor, and say, hey, somebody offered me a cheaper product. I'm going to send some of my transactions to this other API, right? And so that's kind of the tough part, is how do you operate with cost efficiency? And then what's that price point? Because you might want to change your pricing after you acquire your first 100 customers in this space. You might say, well, this is not sustainable because now our infrastructure costs are more than the gross margin of my revenue. And so now I got to increase my prices slowly and sneak in something else, right? So eventually you'll have some customer retention, but again, people are then thinking about how do I make it hard for them to unsubscribe, and there's some dark patterns that you can think about, but don't use those. But that's always a possibility. Last few phases here, additional funding based on your product and your projections. Think about the VCs and private equity funds that might help you with this phase. So prepare for additional fundraising to a different Series A, Series B round, or going from seed round and VC round into more of this level rounds to basically you're trading your equity for more runway, and hopefully you still have enough equity to make some profit by selling your company at some point, right? Metrics that I think are interesting are statistics around your product progress, community size, attention, competitor analysis, differentiating features, and the unfair advantage that you might have from team members or other types of technology that you've researched and experimented with. So those are the phases that I wanted to share. A big part of the key takeaways here: coding is only a small part of the startup. So for those who are kind of first-time founders or first-time entrepreneurs, think about this as a challenge of how do I refine my startup and how do I think of the business side of things. You can definitely leverage the hackathon and maybe DAOs at your meeting to get early team members aligned. Maybe you found some rockstar developers. I think the best quote that I've heard is greatness is in the agency of others. So think about your strengths, think about other people's strengths, and kind of foster that community, because you can't do everything yourself. It's not a single person startup. You need other ideas. Maybe there's somebody that's more creative, or maybe you vibe very well, but there needs to be some type of friction as well. There also needs to be a lot of alignment for there to be a successful company. Communication and project management is key to achieving your goals together. So I think that's understated. A lot of people, have these passion projects that don't go anywhere or don't get funding. And I think some of that is because they're not holding themselves accountable to their deliverables, or they're not, thinking about the bigger picture in some way. Also, understanding the market is a important lesson, and it's hard to just say, I get where the market's going, because I'm always looking at competitors, right? The market changes very quickly, and just don't forget to pay attention to what's happening in the ecosystem. Also, document everything. It helps with onboarding. It helps with people, understanding your vision and also gaining momentum, especially for creating a DAO. Having all those base documents is extremely important. And then don't forget about opportunity costs. So time is opportunity cost, right? If you're spending time on this project, you're not spending time on others, and fail fast, or else you're actually going to be spending too much time on a project that might just be a feature somewhere else. Okay, let me do a quick time check. Okay, I have 15 minutes. This last section I put in here because a lot of people have asked me, how do I leverage AI in the hackathon or on my personal starting of a particular company? I just wanted to share some musings. It might be interesting for those in here. Let me just escape and check if other people have any questions. AI is the flavor of 2023. Agreed. Okay, I'm going to answer these questions at the end. Thank you. You know what? I'm going to answer these now. Okay. So it seems that currently blockchain decentralization is like a socialist democracy. Not quite a democracy, not quite decentralization. That's true. I mean, that's why people get involved, is they hope for airdrop. There's a lot of airdrop farmers as well. What should I expect? Yes, product market fit should happen before funding. So here's the thing. Some people obviously create the product in parallel to funding. So there is, salespeople always sell something that isn't there. and I think entrepreneurs are all salespeople. Like, sales is in everything. You need to understand your idea, but also sell the idea. And product market fit could just be, hey, I see these successful people in the market that are doing something like this, and therefore I'm building something that is comparable, but with my special sauce. So why do you need funding? It's so that you can pay for the OpEx costs of additional developers, or maybe there's kind of an agreement of OpEx with all the people that are contributing. Feel free to type in any thoughts. I'm happy to discuss this. I mean, I think it's not an easy thing to do, to start a company and to kind of get it off the road. And there's obviously a lot of different roles that you have to play, but funding is kind of in the back of people's minds, right? if you can build a product in parallel. Yeah, and perhaps funding is not just coming from a VC side. So you may do seed funding from, your advisors or from the people that think that your idea has some merit and value, and kind of from the business school point of view, a lot of people, all they think about is funding, and all they think about is how valuable is their product, and how do they pivot their product if they need to, and if they see something new come along. But funding does not necessarily need to be VC funding. It's just how do you pay for the initial costs of having this particular company. And maybe you don't incorporate yet, and you're just kind of building something out. But we're here for the tech, not the casino. Yeah, so I think that funding and so I agree that building the tech and building for open source is the right way to do it and the right way to meet people, and everything to keep in mind. But the hard part is most VC funding for Web3 projects have shifted over to AI based projects. So I believe, I have a few friends who go to kind of these like VC type of areas, and they have seen the last 9 out of 10 checks go into an AI company rather than a Web3 company. So it might be a lot harder, and maybe the market and the macroeconomic forces have shifted from the technology side. I think the product itself needs to be there. I mean, there needs to be a beta of some sort that demonstrates the value that you're trying to add, obviously, before you can get funding. But I don't think that it's crazy to say that people use their connections and advisors to at least have runway to experiment for 3 months, or to maybe this is just kind of seed fundraising. I think it's a good discussion for sure. Let me see if there's other. Commodity security dilemma for your token itself. I think that's I think that's also important. Is you do not want your token to be a security. It should. There's kind of the argument of the utility token, but actually most of the regulations out there look at decentralization more than utility, and you can use it as like a subscription model of some sort, like, oh well, you're a lifetime supporter and therefore you'll get early releases and other types of perks, but they cannot be direct investment releases unless you start doing KYC of your accredited investors for the initial token launch. I'm happy to have additional discussions. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, Gregor, with the Z, with a lot of Z's in between, but would love to have additional chats. So I'll share my email. Thank you, Greg. Okay, I do have a little bit more content that I can cover in 10 minutes, or I could end early and continue answering questions. What are the options for projects that have no way to make profit but seek to bring some value? In a realistic scenario, the value that you're looking to bring needs to be additive to other areas. So if you're looking for creating something within a particular network, you can look for grants or different types of bounties that help with that network. Again, these aren't usually big enough checks for you to maintain the project for long enough, but look for the different partners in the space and see if there's additional costs for, again, there does need to be product market fit and the understanding of how you're adding value to the protocol, and finding other open source contributors as well. Support from consensus. I mean, we are always on the lookout for projects. We have a Tachyon program under Consensus Mesh, and there's always competition again to be a part of this. We also have a startup program, and it's a small cost, but we provide advisory as well as access to all the tooling and even access to our product people if you are building an extension of some sort. Thank you, Greg. I will respond to that. Okay, so I'm just going to do this part very, very quickly because there might be some tools here that you can use immediately. So I've been my background is in engineering, and after I did my master's, I traveled the world writing research reports around AI. So I did a stint at Osaka University as well as Hamburg University, building out AI algorithms for robotics, as well as DARPA projects. And I've followed AI quite a bit, and I'm just increasingly impressed at the velocity and the momentum around the open source AI models that are coming out with fewer parameters in their learning, but also just the use cases that have propped up. I think that the angle here is there's twofold. One is using AI to increase your productivity on an individual level. And then two is using AI for more company-based improvements. So maybe including some gimmicks that I'll talk about in the next few slides. The main purpose is to realize that AI, as with ChatGPT and other types of open kind of chat models, is an assistant, and execution is the one thing, again, that cannot be replaced. But you can use these tools efficiently and be more productive. The places where I've seen AI get implemented are pretty much with Web3 in these areas. On the retail feature side, there's a lot of onboarding. So how can I chat with my docs? Maybe something related to AI tutors. So what's the educational program for getting people familiar with the APIs that I'm building? Maybe there's first drafts for coding. Maybe tutorials are all built with kind of ChatGPT requests and kind of code snippets that way. Auditing and debugging may be a part of your continuous integration, continuous delivery program. APIs that are exposed via GPT plugins. We've seen Solana do this, as well as a few others. DeFi Llama has a GPT plugin. There's probably a content explosion of some sort where there's AI writers and videos that are created. And then GPT SEO. So how do I do SEO, or kind of this, instead of using search engines, now you have like search generative engines, meaning you're trying to get more context, and you're using, instead of like a single query, you're creating a fine-tuning prompt or set of prompts to answer your particular business questions. In terms of company internal usage, training for employees, DAO onboarding, I'm gonna join that shortly. Product feature velocity increase. I feel that middle management is probably at risk here. People can use, for example, Zoom has its own AI tool coming out so that you can transcribe all your Zoom meetings and then project manage that a little bit easier. Product feature release velocity, I think, could be super interesting. There could be an internal AI tool that learns your product docs and business strategy, and then you can chat with it in Slack to get refinement on what your product looks like, and maybe ask, well, what's the update for the week? Can you aggregate across all of the Zoom transcriptions and tell me what should I expect for the next week or the next month coming out? So examples of this, and this is from May, I believe. Crypto.com introduced Amy, which is just a chatbot. Binance does Binance Sensei, an AI assistant. Kappa.ai is pretty cool. It's basically a SaaS product that allows you to upload your documents, and then I believe Avalanche, Moonbeam, and Algorand are all using Kappa.ai as an interface directly in their system. I know that Alchemy, for example, also has a few products that are in the same life, which is either you're chatting with the documentation or replacing some customer service through Discord bots, or directly interacting with your vision. Solana has an RPC that I believe uses a different service. Ooh, I forgot the name of their service, Hyper or something. But anyway, the idea is that you can use this interface of chatting in order to build other connections to it. Oh, this is a standard marketing procedure, which is how do I connect the sources of support, documentation, help desk, Git repo, create these chatbot widgets, either through APIs, Discord bots, website widgets, and then reduce your support costs. This is a Discord AI bot called Ava GPT. This was from Kappa AI. And just as a note, I really like the core app within Avalanche. It looks really cool. DeFi Llama has a ChatGPT plugin, and you can query it, put things into tables, ask it different questions. I mentioned kind of in the start of all this that I found that the acceleration of this is kind of crazy. I think that AI won't be able to do this. This is from a book from a year or two ago, having these claims that AI won't be able to do it. And this is just to show that, yes, probably it can, and it will in a shorter amount of time than we think. And I think that the focus of it will be a little bit different. We were promised full self-driving for years now, and there are issues either with switching over to different types of light sensors rather than video. All of these things are leading to what I think is kind of a flip of blue collar and white collar work. So software costs are going to be reduced highly. It's a deflationary power right now because VCs will probably write smaller checks and be more selective because there are fewer moats. That Google talked about their internal memo saying that their particular moat might be at risk. And so they're building out features and launching features much faster because they feel that if they don't, they'll fall behind maybe smaller companies that are just building faster. I think that flip between blue collar and white collar might be interesting when these AI bots build bounties, and those bounties just make it cheaper to do human work for the AI. So full self-driving might not come to play because you can just, have an Uber driver, and that type of economy is pretty interesting. And the last slide here, I probably have more examples of this, but which LLM chat service should you use? I've tried all of these. I play with them quite a bit. For internet tasks and image analysis tasks, I choose Bard. So Bard has Google Lens in the backend. It's implemented their image services. They've kind of disrupted their own search product. And for general, querying of summaries of news products and newsletters, I think Bard does a great job. For ChatGPT, if you have a Plus subscription, I highly recommend it. The code interpreter is amazing at analyzing data and looking at building out kind of self-executing code inside of Python that ChatGPT writes itself. So really fascinating. It's also pretty good at writing, and I think that's going to be one of the main things that I use it for. And Claude by Anthropic was launched. Claude 2 was launched recently. It has 100,000 context window, and so any type of long PDF that you send it, it will be able to read fully and also have a longer chat about it. So I found analyzing long PDFs to be better done at Claude level. And then internet access in terms of research, I like personally Perplexity, but Bing is also pretty good. It has GPT-4 in the back end and has internet search powers. So Perplexity gives you references to the different sources. I would highly recommend using those. I don't have time to cover this, and I do have to run to another meeting, but feel free to read through the slides. There are obviously really fun things that you can do, and maybe I'll do a follow-up for everyone here covering that.
All right. Thank you, Clemens, for braving the cold to give us this incredibly insightful session. I hear you sniffing. No worries at all. It's just I hear you sniffing in between you speaking, and my heart goes out to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with all of us actionable steps in creating longevity to the hackathon projects. So for those who are thinking about incorporating or fundraising after the hackathon, I hope you took away some tips and key insights. And as Clemens has mentioned at the start, in the middle of his session, this session will be available in the resources page of your Builder's Guide. So keep your eyes peeled. And also feel free to stay around to mingle with each other. I know Clemens has to leave, so please do for your meeting. But for everyone else, feel free to connect to him via LinkedIn. I think he shared his email address, in the chat, so you can do that too. Or just stay around to mingle with each other. Thank you so much, Clemens. See ya. Okay.